Hello and welcome to KGS IAS YouTube channel. Recently, Great Indian Bustard was in news as Wildlife Institute of India has released a status and trend report of Great Indian Bustard mainly distributed in the Thar Desert area. In this backdrop, we will try to understand what are some of the major issues that are running around Great Indian Bustard, where it is distributed, and what are some threats, challenges that Great Indian Bustard is facing. This report has been released by the Wildlife Institute of India, and within that Wildlife Institute, it is the National Board for Wildlife who is responsible for assessing this report, and it has delegated its power under the special committee which is headed by the Minister of Environment. Great Indian Bustard is one of the important bird species of our country. The Great Indian Bustard mainly limited to the Rajasthan and Gujarat area. It is very interesting to understand that just few decades back, in 1978, the number of Great Indian Bustard was around 745. And within the next 30 years, the number has dropped to 150. So it's one of the great damage, and because of that only, IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature, has put this bird in the threatened category, and under the threatened category, it has been categorized as critically endangered. So the last assessment has happened in 2018 and the number was roughly around 150. So what has happened in that 30-40 year, we will just try to understand, and more importantly, what are some key findings of this year's assessment. So the main finding of the assessment that has been released is the number is around 130 plus minus 21. So obviously the number is still very less, but it is very encouraging to see that number is not dropping rapidly. So the number was roughly in the same range in 2018 and the number is still prevailing in 2026. So within the 8 years time period, number is not improving, but also the number is not going down, and in between lots of steps has taken place. In fact, there was a Supreme Court ruling also related to the conservation of the Great Indian Bustard and some of the related issue. Now, in general, Great Indian Bustard is one of the heaviest flying bird. The size, the weight is around 15 kg. And earlier, before this 1970s, the Great Indian Bustard was well distributed in around 11 states of our country, but now it is mainly present in 2 of the states, that is Rajasthan, Gujarat. Small proportion of the Great Indian Bustard also present in the Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Madhya Pradesh, but the number is very much insignificant. And in fact, out of the major presence of the Great Indian Bustard, almost more than 50% lies in the Rajasthan, and within the Rajasthan, it is mainly concentrated in some smaller area. So the area is also shrinking. So one of the very interesting result of this report is it is mainly prevalent in the smaller area, because the area where the Great Indian Bustard are presently present is the Desert National Park. So the Desert National Park is the main area of the Great Indian Bustard. But within that Desert National Park, its area, its habitat is shrinking. So of course the numbers are encouraging, and it shows that whatever the provisions, whatever the conservation methodology has been applied, it is giving a result. Now, as far as the Great Indian Bustard is concerned, what has happened in that few decades that its number has declined so rapidly? It is very interesting to know or to understand that Great Indian Bustard is a bird which is having a good lateral vision. So its lateral vision is very good, but its frontal vision is very poor. So because the bird is heavy and its frontal vision is poor, so it will not be able to identify if something is coming directly in front of that bird. In fact, that is why the evolution of the nature was such that this bird, because of this provision, was not prevalent in any of the forest area. This is a typical bird associated with the grassland vegetation, because in the grassland vegetation there will be a less obstruction. Whenever it is flying, it will not have the obstruction. So Great Indian Bustard is also considered as an indicator of the grassland vegetation. So if you want to know the health of our ecosystem, health of grassland ecosystem, the only thing that you need to check out is the number of Great Indian Bustard. If the number is stable, means our grassland vegetation is comparatively doing better. But if the number is declining, decreasing, it simply means that the grassland vegetation overall is not doing well. Now, what has happened which led to the sudden decline? So the causes of decline that has happened in earlier time period, the very first thing that you need to know is change of landscape. So there has been a change of landscape, that is mainly from the grassland to agricultural activity, or you can say farmland. So grassland has been converted for the agricultural purpose. Also, you need to very much careful that this is not only happened in India. This has happened almost throughout the world. So everywhere the population increase, when they will have a rising of the population, the demand for the food will increases, and when there is a more demand for the food, obviously the easy way out will be the grassland, because in the grassland area the grasses are short, area is very open, so we have a large size area that is open. So obviously some of the people will try to acquire those areas, try to encroach those areas. Very early this area, that is in our country of Rajasthan region, has been declared as the national park. So when it has been declared the national parks, obviously the landscape conversion was less prevalent, but still the number was continuously declining. So what was the reason for that? Now you need to understand some basic. The very second thing, that is the main reason for this problem of declining of Great Indian Bustard, is like killing, hunting, poaching. So this is also became a very important factor. Then the next factor is the Great Indian Bustard just have generally in a year only one egg, and the hatching of that egg will take around 30 days time period. So that 30 days time period, eggs will be threatened from the different factors. It can be, let's say, animals are grazing in that landscape, and the animals are grazing, so the eggs can be affected. Then some of the lizards are there, some of the other organisms are there which will prey on that particular egg. So the initial time period of that 30 days is very crucial for the survival of the eggs of the Great Indian Bustard. So this has also affected the number. And then came the most important factor in the 21st century, because the whole world is facing the problem of the climate change. Within the backdrop of climate change, the most important factor that is coming out in this climate change is the production of renewable energy. And in the source of renewable energy, there are two energy sources that are very important. One is solar, another one is a wind. So desert area is a very good area for the development of the wind. And for the wind production, wind energy production, we will put up the turbines, windmills. Now when the windmills are there, obviously whenever the bird is flying, it will get obstructed, because it will have very poor frontal vision. They will not be able to identify that what lies, and there will be accident, and ultimately they will get killed. And after the generation of electricity, we will also put up poles and wires, because the transmission of electricity is important. So in last 20-30 years, this transmission lines, electric lines, became the main factor for the killing of most of the great Indian bustard. So large number of great Indian bustards are getting killed because of this electric lines, electric wires. And related to this, there was a very famous civil case as well as writ in the Supreme Court, and in that writ petition, Supreme Court has given the judgment based on recommendation by the expert committee. Now here we need to understand that it is not as easy to simply say that all the electric wires we need to just discard. We need to go for the removing all these things, because you also need to understand that the energy generation is very important, because climate change is another factor. Climate change will also affect the all the species, including the great Indian bustard. So from that perspective, we need renewable energy, we need to generate the wind energy, but also we need to conserve the great Indian bustard. So there was two major suggestions that has been given by the Supreme Court. One was dedicated power corridor. So one suggestion was developing dedicated power corridors, and the second was transmission line taken to the underground. Of course, taking the transmission lines underground was bit difficult. So all the transmission line cannot be converted to the underground. But these two provisions have been implemented, and when it has been implemented, obviously it has started giving result. So after this, there has been all the other effect. So in last 20 years, government is very much concerned about taking care of all these problems that the great Indian bustard is going through. So be it your development of power corridor, be it development of some of the other provisions. So we have declared this as a national park. We have initiated the project Great Indian Bustard. Initially, primarily it has been initiated project Great Indian Bustard. So it has been mainly initiated by the Rajasthan government in association with the Wildlife Institute of India. Great Indian Bustard is not only important for the ecosystem, is not only important from the perspective of the nature and the bird, it is also very important from the cultural aspect. In Rajasthan, this is known as Godawan, and it is their state bird. So other than the state bird, Godawan is also very revered bird in some communities like Bishnoi communities. So in Bishnoi communities, this bird is very important, very holds a great cultural significance. In fact, when the India was selecting the we were declaring the national bird of our country, in the last list of birds that has been identified, that has been shortlisted, the Godawan was also one of the bird, but ultimately we have gone for the Indian peacock. So Indian peacock has been declared as the national bird. So project Great Indian Bustard has been initiated, and the project Great Indian Bustard has given a great result, because under this project Great Indian Bustard, there is a provision of captive breeding. So idea is that we will also provide that 30 days time period, and we will create a kind of environment, a condition in the monitored manner, so that the eggs of the Great Indian Bustard will not get affected, will not get destroyed by any of the threats that are possible. Because the threat is for both, that is Great Indian Bustard bird as well as the eggs that it is laying. And the report suggested that recently some of the chicks have been hatched in the Nalia. Nalia is another reason for the Kutch region where the Great Indian Bustards are present. So in Nalia, the first captive breeding has given a good result, and the eggs have passed that first 30 days period, and it is around 40 days. And now the government will initiate the process of transferring this Great Indian Bustard to wild. So captive breeding programs are also giving good result. So the population is around 130 plus minus 21, but more importantly, the population is very much stagnant. So we have a stagnant population, a stable population, and a stable population simply suggests that most of the measures, most of the provisions government's taking is a doing much good thing. Now, within the backdrop of this report, there are few things that you need to understand, that as far as this report is concerned, the report is being published by the Wildlife Institute of India. Wildlife Institute of India is located in headquarters in Dehradun. Under the Wildlife Institute of India, National Board for Wildlife, it is the highest decision making body, and this is being headed by the Prime Minister. So Prime Minister is a chairman. The vice chairman of this is a Minister of Environment, Forest, Climate Change. So Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change is the vice chairman, and it is being established under Schedule 5A of the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. So this is also you need to know. Then under this there is a standing committee. Standing committee is like performing the day-to-day activity. It is performing to some of the major provisions. So recently it was the 91st standing committee meeting in which it has been decided. So the status and trend report has been mainly released by this standing committee under the National Board for Wildlife. A standing committee will have a delegated powers. So it has been delegated powers by the National Board for Wildlife, and recently the status and trend report that has been released, it has been released by the 91st standing committee. Now other than this, one more thing you also need to know, that under the IUCN Red Data Book, this species, that is Great Indian Bustard, is critically endangered, and also under the CITES, it is in Appendix 1. Also under the CMS, same appendix. Also under the Wildlife Protection Act 1972, Schedule 1. So this is under the Schedule 1. Schedule 1 species are simply those species for which hunting and killing is completely prohibited. There are some provision under the schedule itself, and based on that only the species can be hunted, mainly in case of if they are threat to the general public, and also if some diseases are prevalent. In general, what you just need to remember, that this lies in the Schedule 1, means there is no killing, there is no hunting is being allowed. So these things also you need to know, because these facts are also being asked in your prelims examination. From the mains perspective, you just need to understand that the report, of course, it is having a direct face value. So directly it will be asked in your examination that what are the status of your Great Indian Bustard. But more importantly, it is more important from the perspective that there are other species in our country that are getting affected. There are other ecosystems that are threatened, and in that backdrop, it is very important to take learn from this report, that if we can achieve the stability of the Great Indian Bustard, so we can achieve the stability in other areas also. So this is a very powerful, it has given a very powerful mechanism, tool for the conservation of nature, for the conservation of species, for the conservation of ecosystem. Because the number of Great Indian Bustard is stable, it means our ecosystem, our grassland ecosystem is also stable. Stability of ecosystem is paramount, but also stability of species is also important. So from that perspective, both has been achieved, that is species stability as well as ecosystem grassland stability. But it doesn't mean that the job has been done or the government should become complacent and they will start saying that everything is fine. Government needs to continue to take care of all the threats that are prevalent. So the habitat fragmentation, that is the big problem. The encroachment, that is a big problem. Then conversion of the landscape, that is also a big problem. So government needs to continue the conservation, and more importantly, the people's participation is very important. And people's participation, the people's awareness is continuously needs to be carried out. Also, if you will look out, so from the topics, questions are being asked both in the prelims and mains examination. Like in one of the previous year, they have directly asked the question with reference to the India's desert national park, which of the following statement are correct. So they used to ask this type of question regularly, where they will check that whether it was in which category of IUCN, which of the organization has released. It is part of Schedule 1 of Wildlife Protection Act or in other schedules. So factual informations will be asked in your prelims examination, but also some of the analytical aspect, the conservation methodology will be asked in your mains examination. So from both prelims and mains examination perspective, this topic is very important, and you need to know all these fact information about the Great Indian Bustard. So I hope that now you will have some clarity that what significance of this status and trend report of Great Indian Bustard is for your examination, mainly related to the environment topic of your prelims as well as GS3 of your mains examination.